All right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome, everyone, to a webinar on how Mount Sinai improved BI governance and engagement with metric insights. Today, we are joined by Damon Myers, the Director of Enterprise Analytics Services over at Mount Sinai, and Marius Moscovici, the founder and CEO of Metric Insights. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I kick it off to Marius. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So if you do have any questions, please put it into the Q&A window, the Q&A room, or you can put it into the chat as well. And then all lines are going to be muted. We are recording this, so I will send the recording later today for you to review. If you'd like a copy of the slides, please just respond to my email and I can send them over to you. All right, Marius, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Zoe, and thank you, Damon, for joining us today and to tell your story. And we're going to today, as far as the agenda, what we're planning, I'm going to give a quick overview of Metric Insights. I'll share a few slides on sort of what it is, just because I know there may be people on the call here that are not as familiar with what a BI portal is and how it works. And then also give a quick demo so you kind of have an idea a way to ground the theoretical, more general, high level presentation aspect where we describe what the BI portal is with examples of what it might look like. And then we're going to transition over to Damon, who's going to really give you both an overview of Mount Sinai, but then more importantly, drill into really what their solution was about, what they were able to accomplish, and do a live demo there as well, so you can actually see it in action. So we've got a lot planned, and then at the end of that, if there's any questions, we'll have a Q&A or other discussion as time permits. All right. So, at a high level, what is a sort of BI portal about? What sort of generally BI governance about? Well, it's easiest to understand that if you think about the current state of BI, most organizations, so most places, most hospital networks, there are multiple BI tools. There are the clinical reporting tools, of course, like the hospital records management systems and so forth, like Epic or other tools that you're using. But there are also tools that are there. Oftentimes, there's some perhaps legacy type reporting, postal reports, WebFocus. Sometimes there's files out there that people use for reporting that are in SharePoint or in Shared Drive. And then a lot of times there are also more modern reporting tools like Power BI and Tableau in the mix. So for a typical consumer, maybe somebody who needs to span both reporting across the clinical and non-clinical side, or even if they're just looking in one particular silo, they've got a lot of places to look, and it creates a very disconnected experience around analytics, which means that you really can't govern it. I mean, the governance in each of these platforms is a little bit different, and so there's no way to coherently govern the experience for the user across all these platforms. And that creates a low user engagement because people end up stumbling across duplicate content, not knowing exactly where to find reports, having obsolete content that they're looking at, and that is all creates sort of a very poor user experience, right? And what we want to achieve, of course, from a governance perspective, is access to all analytics through a single pane of glass, and have that pane of glass be governed. Right. So whether it's clinical reporting from Epic, non-clinical reporting from other sources, or reporting, no matter how many different tools you have, if you're swapping tools over time, which organizations do, as new technologies become available, old technologies become less practical to continue to invest in, yet there's still reports there. To have a single pane of glass to access all that information and manage that experience across that. And that is what a BI portal is. It's that governance platform that you deploy across your entire, in front of, I should say, all of your BI tools in order to drive higher engagement among your users. Right. So the major reasons that you do it are to basically get easy access reporting across tools, as I mentioned, to have enable discoverability, and I'll show you a little bit of that. It can be an AI enabled or not, but the point is that you need to be able to get across access across the entire portfolio and find the right report. That's particularly important for somebody new in an organization where they're not necessarily going to know what reports are already there, and then also to do access requests, right? And that's a big deal, and Damon will talk about that a bit. The process. So if I'm looking for a report and I don't find it, and I don't know that it exists just because I wasn't given access to it, and I can't request access to it, well, that can generate a duplicate report because I'll go to my analyst and ask for somebody to recreate it for me. Effective BI governance of all. So certification is important, obviously, so that people can tell what's most important. Ensuring that people are not looking at obsolete duplicative content, but bubbling up the things that are actually useful. And then improving data literacy. So that means, when I'm looking at a report, understanding what it means. How do we measure hospital readmission? If there's a particular rate that's being, when we look at mortality rate or any measure or metric, how is that measured? How is that defined? So that I can really understand as a consumer of the content what I'm looking at and properly interpret and take action. And then ultimately, based on that, then you want to increase engagement, right? And that means creating a delightful, a role-based user experience, something that is geared towards what the consumer of this content wants to do, helping them get to value as quickly as possible, and then ability to push critical information out to people also via email distributions, phone, whatever surface area makes sense, and then potentially delivering alerting on KPIs when they trend. If all of a sudden I have my readmit rate goes high beyond what I would expect, and I'm responsible for that metric, I want to know about it and I want to be able to act on it. So all those things are very important. So how do you do it? Like what's the template for putting this together, right? So the way to think about this at a logical level is on one end, you start with all of your different BI tools, whatever they might be, as well as other tools like your Epic and other technologies that have a BI included in them. And then we start by basically we have a plugin infrastructure that connects to them and pulls out the key metadata from these technologies, right, with native APIs associated with it. Then once you've got that, really gives you a list of all the objects that are out there. But that's really the beginning of the journey, right? In the sense that you don't want to necessarily promote all of that content. There's going to be some of that content is obsolete. No one's looking at those reports. Others might be redundant. So you want to have a rationalization and governance layer where you bring in the content that is really relevant. And then we can talk about the approach that they use at Mount Sinai, but each organization can be a little bit different as to how they decide what are those subset of the overall superset of reports that are relevant for users to be able to consume. And you bubble them up through a rationalization and governance process. And in some cases, you integrate to a data catalog. Now, that could be a Calibra, Elation, Informatica, or it could just be a catalog that you've assembled and put together in Excel or CSV, SharePoint, and anything like that would work as well. But the point being is you enrich it with things like glossary terms. Maybe you have what tables, which information, where PI data exists. You kind of integrate that into this information, and then you publish it into a catalog. And that catalog is, of course, connected to your AD system, LDAP, synchronized with security model for underlying BI tool if AD is not used for security within that tool. And it enables search and discoverability of content and finding the right visualization. And this is the beginning of the user journey, right? The user can get to the catalog and access that. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Then a layer that can go, this is kind of an optional layer that's available that can go on top of that is what we call our concierge layer. This is the sort of LLM-based capabilities. So this enables discoverability for your end users through natural language queries. I'll show you what that looks like. You may or may not enable this layer depending upon what your AI governance rules are. But if you do enable it, you can surface it then through your collaboration tools like Slack and Teams, so that anywhere users are, they can ask questions looking for a particular report, have a conversation with a bot that will help them recommend the right content for them. And then finally, you deliver everything through a persona-based user experience, right? So at the desktop or on mobile or wherever it is that your users are going to consume this, you want to be able to do that or via email, everything optimized to what the users are going to actually need to consume. Okay, so enough of the presentation. Let's take a look a few minutes at what one of these things, a quick demo, just a general demo, and then we will switch over to see what Mount Sinai created. So what you're looking at here is the Metric Insights catalog. So imagine we've gone through those steps in the process that we just reviewed, and now we've published all that content into your catalog. And so here you've got a number of different objects. Each report in your system can be represented as a tile here in the catalog. And You can also have KPIs. So you've got kind of two different kinds of objects: reporting objects, where we're going to be clicking through and consuming that content with a Tableau or Power BI or in SharePoint or wherever it is that it lives. And then you're going to have these metrics where you're bringing in the data and you're surfacing the high level number to the users, because sometimes starting with that high level number will make more sense. And I'll show you a little bit about how that kind of experience looks like. But the idea here is that everything is here as a tile. You can see which content is certified. You can, by mousing over that little icon, you can identify things like tags and glossary terms and ownership and does it contain PI data. So you have all this information that frames the data literacy for you as a user before you actually consume the content. And here on the left-hand side, you've got folders that organize the content for users in ways that are meaningful for them based on roles. So maybe the folks that are interested in epidemiology within the organization can see that, but then the nursing team can see just the nursing metrics, things of that nature. And then, so these are like cross-functional groupings that are of content. And then you might categorize content functionally here. I've got my clinical content, my employee metrics, my finance, all in different categories, and it's all accessible here. And then I have my favorites. So I can click on a star, add something to my favorites, and then put it in here. And the idea of a favorites, of course, is that as a user, I've self-selected what's interesting to me, and I want to see it all right next to one thing next to the other. And then if I want to see more, then I click on this. I see a preview of that chart. Again, the metadata is here. And then if I click into it again, then I consume that particular analytic in an iframe within the same way that I would in this case it's Tableau. I'm consuming it specifically with the same way that you would within Tableau itself, except that it's you never leave the portal. So you never, and whether you're going to Tableau or Power BI or any other tool, it doesn't matter. You're going to generally be able to keep people within the portal, assuming that tool allows for embedding. So that's the catalog. We talked about that the discovery process in general. So let me just touch base a little bit on that. I'll show you kind of what that discovery looks like, kind of from a chat based. Of course, you can just type something in the search and find it, but you can also enable the sort of a more modern LLM based search. So this is our concierge offering, and maybe I'm asking a question: what reporting do we have? They have patient care. So it's looking across all the glossary terms that we have, all the metadata that we have associated with this content, and it's bringing up the best options for me associated with that. So I've got, these are the best results. There's 17 more. I can ask follow-up questions, and I can say, which of these are certified, as an example. So I can, and it will further call the list, identify the ones that are certified in the full set, and then, I can see here that yes, in fact, this one that are recommended is certified. I can see the description. I can see the tags and various information that's out there. And then if I'm interested, I can kind of further explore this kind of stuff with this tagging mechanism, this glossary terms. I can understand, oh, this is financial report and patient billing. Let's see how is forecast defined? Here's the definition of forecast. So I've got this glossary right there associated with the tool. And then I can even say view other items, and I can find everything that is related that uses that particular glossary term, that uses this financial forecasting. So you're creating these universes of content that's all tied together on these glossary terms, and users can very easily go out and find other related content that is that meets that same criteria, that has that same KPI or uses that particular term. So that's an example of that. And then finally, just before I turn it over to Damon, the other thing I want to mention is that we mentioned the different user experiences, the persona-based user experience, and you'll see in a moment what's there, what was implemented at Mount Sinai. But just to give you kind of another reference point, this is a very common experience that's created, and this is one that illustrates the importance of having KPIs. So oftentimes for some personas, let's imagine you're a hospital executive, or somebody who is really, has to keep track of a whole lot of different metrics. It's much easier. You want to just see those numbers. It's much easier for you to start with the numbers. You don't want to open up 20 dashboards. Maybe I've got finance metrics in one set of dashboards. Maybe each of these is a separate dashboard. I've got some operational metrics. Each of those could be a dashboard, and patient care could be another whole set of dashboard. So you could create these experiences where instead of making users open 20 dashboards every day, which simply won't, you can surface up the high-level KPIs, start with that, show them what's red, what's green, and then from here, if they want to, then when they're interested in looking at something, they can click into it, and then they can either go into the metric insights metric where we track this, or you could take them directly to a report. So it's the idea of these custom experiences are all about really understanding how your users are consuming content, and then streamlining the access process for those users, and either identifying a general persona that you can do that across the board, or making a very persona specific for individual users or groups of users, and or creating multiple experiences that are relevant across the group. So with that, let me stop sharing and turn it over to Damon, so he can give you a sense of what this all this looks like in Mount Sinai.
Still on mute. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hide my controls here so I can do a better job here. All right, great. So very happy to be here. As Maria said, I'm with Mount Sinai Health System in New York. This is a view of New York from south to north. For those of you who might not know that, get back here on the screen. There we go. And here's a little view of our campus. That's from north to south. Some statistics here about our health system. Way north of 40,000 employees, north of 7,000 physicians, north of 3,900 beds, 8 hospitals, and also we have the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary, a resident program, a nursing program, 4.2 million patients annually, 11.3 billion in revenue, and a very large ambulatory footprint as well. So that's Mount Sinai, and I didn't really mention the School of Medicine, but that's part of what the resident program comes from, and also a lot of research as well. But in this context, we were looking for a BI portal, and our problem statement is probably very similar to many others. We have analytics spread across a lot of different platforms. We have no centralized metadata store, no easy way to search across all of those assets, and no consistent way to request access. So much of what we were hearing out in the field was, I have to know somebody. I have to hear it word of mouth to be able to find what's available. I can only see what I have access to, and I don't know what I don't know about what else might be available. So quite simply, we wanted to create the antithesis of that for our target state. We wanted to create a single curated analytics asset portal and make sure that we had the ability to customize that for different personas, and have a large centralized searchable store of metadata, and then an easy, consistent access request process. There were quite a few challenges. We started with just 4 key analytics platforms. Epic has a lot of reporting, obviously. That's our EMR, and now, as of last month, it's also our primary billing system for all hospital inpatient and outpatient billing. Tableau is our sort of primary BI tool now, but we have lots of legacy in places like Crystal Reports, WebFocus, and many others that were not in scope for this initial implementation that we are now turning to. Different types of assets, and the state of the metadata was different, and different characteristics, and very different ways that access was managed and controlled. And of course, at the end of the day, we wanted to see all of those things in a single view. It was a tall ask, but Metric Insights was up to the challenge. So we did create a custom portal. So you'll see it's a little bit different from what Marius just showed you. We did that because we had 2 different sort of high-level types of assets. We had the element-based assets, which is what Marius was showing on those pretty little tiles. And then we have link-only content. We wanted to see everything in a single view and not have to switch between those. So I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. We also did want to have a sort of integrated metadata store, but we wanted that to be updated in an automated way. And the tools that are available in Metric Insights made that possible. And that included centralizing and automating the refresh of the access control data as well. And finally, we wanted to integrate with our existing ServiceNow platform, and we did that via API and created a seamless, easy access request control process for our users. So this is similar to what you saw in Marius's demo. This is the element-based view. I am going to go through my slides first, and then I'll pop out and do an actual demo. And this is what we ended up with, which is a little different, but helps us achieve that integrated view. So we have across the top two primary tabs: My Content, All Content. I'll show you the difference there. We have the favorites that Marius pointed out. We have the ability to filter down either by category or type, or do a keyword search. So this is the consolidated My Content view, and allows you to quickly sort of click through and see what's there, or go out and look for other things. When you click down on one of the carrots, you do still see a little bit of a preview, a description. If there are tags, if there's categories, all of that is displayed. And if it's a link-only item, not an element-based item, then you don't see that little thumbnail of the image, but you can still see all of the other metadata that's available. And the hover that Marius mentioned is also still available, and it still has things like, metadata for around owners and engagement. We also have a couple of examples where we've integrated some custom links to link out to some glossary pages. I'll show you that in a moment. And then the all content area is everything else. It's actually both. It's everything I have access to alongside everything I don't have access to. But now I can do a keyword search across the entire universe of assets, data assets, and not just the stuff I already have access to. And that's what was missing, a huge big gap at Mount Sinai, because our homegrown portal would only show you what you had access to and could only really search across titles. We didn't have other metadata. So this was a huge improvement already, just this piece of it. I mentioned the keyword search, still available to do category and asset type filters as well. And then here is where you see the little locks. Those are things I don't have access to, but clicking that lock will generate an API call to ServiceNow, and you get an immediate response with your request ID and a success ticket. And actually, if you click it again by accident because you got a phone call and you forgot, and you click it again, you'll be told, hey, you know what? You did that already. This user, this report, there already is a request for that. So it helps reduce accidental duplicate tickets. And we don't have a lot of that process automated, but that is next step for us, because Metric Insights offers that. We have some other internal tools that offer that. So we will be taking this to the next step of actually trying to automate some of that provisioning as well. And finally, I wanted to show the approach that we took for our metadata store. Yeah, again, all of this is built into Metric Insights. We were able to create these data sets. We're pulling a couple of different ways. The Tableau metadata is being pulled using their plugin that Marius mentioned earlier. The others we're pulling directly out of data tables that were purpose-built for this process. It's all aggregated together and pulled together nicely in a set of data sets or views, as you can see here. The thumbnails are automatically pulled as part of that connector, that plugin that I mentioned, which is a huge time saver for aggregating all that content. And finally, the API, we used a simple parameterized URL approach to this. We're sending, as you can see at the top here, we're only sending network ID, the report type, name, and ID out of the metadata. And then from that, where there's a mapping based on that type that says, okay, if it's Epic or Crystal, it goes to this assignment group in ServiceNow. If it's Tableau or WebFocus, it goes to this assignment group. That helps route it. And then we use that network ID to look up all the information for the user. So a very, very simple and straightforward process, very quick, and like I said, seamless and very helpful for the users. So the solution in the end, we already talked about it, the custom data portal, combining all the assets. We have that integrated automated data store, including access control, and we have that API for ServiceNow. This was our initial implementation. Now we're turning our attention to sort of a next phase. We've done a soft rollout and already seen a tremendous response and tremendous success in terms of increasing engagement. So let me move now to the demo. I'm logged in as myself as a user here. And there's that my content that we saw. This is all of my content. I can filter down by categories. I can filter down by types. If I want to see just all of my Tableau content, I can do that. If I want to see only my WebFocus content, I can do that. Go back easily to all things. And then, of course, I can also do searches here as well. So anything that has LOS or is LOS related in the description will come up here. Easy way to quickly find things in your own content. The all content, as I said, it's a mixture of things that you already have access to, and as well as things that you don't. And you can do that same kind of keyword search here. Pick something, click on it, and request access, and you get an immediate response back from ServiceNow here with that ticket number. And if I click on that, close this, and click on that again, I'm going to get that same thing saying, "Hey, you already did that. You know, why are you trying to create a duplicate?" So that's very, very helpful. And our individual reporting teams really appreciate that. They're not getting duplicate requests, and the users appreciate that too. And so now that just created a ticket in ServiceNow that my team will see and will respond to. What was not in scope for this initial build, but that what we did want to have some examples of as we were moving out to our leadership for funding, to be frank, was that we wanted to show the next level. What was next? And one of the things that's going to be next for us is something that Marius mentioned quickly, which was the metrics. So the ability for us to add in individual metrics and for users to be able to create their own groupings of metrics. So this grouping, I've added them to favorites to quickly get to the ones that I care about. But if I go over here to all content and I filter based on the metrics as a type, these are all the metrics that are available, and I can see all the ones that I have favorited. So if I want to, add another one here, like let's see, I'll add the mortality average for Mount Sinai there. I'm going to add that to my executive favorites, save those changes. And I made that separate grouping there for myself. Now I can go over here, and that one has been added right here, the MSH mortality average. So very easy to use. If this is the grouping that you've created for yourself, you can easily click down here. You can see I've got this still filtered. It's still respecting that filter because I have other things in here that are not showing. You can see the spark lines quickly, make sure everything's going in the right direction. And if one of them is not going in the right direction, just click on it and go right into the interface for these individual metrics. Now from here, I can go right into the glossary terms, and this was coming right out of our Informatica suite where we track all the glossary terms in Axon. We've got everything related to LOS here, and including some details about how it's calculated. And you can also play around with the timeframes and such here as well. So if you wanted to see statistical views or change the timeframes, all of that is available too. And I think I might have this up a little bit so I can't see the, yeah, there we go. There we go. Change the time frame on the fly and some of the other values as well. I'm going to actually make this a little smaller so I can see the bottom here. So one of the other things I could do, I'm looking at LOS right now for just Mount Sinai. Maybe I don't want to see that 1 year. I just want to see the actuals and the sort of moving average. But I also want to see that in relationship to what's happening in the total enterprise. So I can go in and do an overlay, change this to all, and I can pull in that LOS total all sites value and have that overlay as well right on top. So now I can see that the darker blue is my Mount Sinai average, and the lighter blue is my all sites average. And again, play around with the time frame if I want to, so I can zoom in a little bit more, go back and forth between those control values to see the standard deviations, et cetera, and the glossary terms. So it really is a great one-stop shop for your executives who are looking for, for those key metrics. And we can, and it will be a next step for us, we will be creating custom portal pages for different kinds of personas, whether it be, executives that are sort of, operations executive versus clinical executives versus financial executives. And we'll be able to create those special sort of portal pages specifically for them. So I think that's everything I wanted to show. Marius, am I forgetting anything? Feel free to let me
No,
know.
I think you touched on everything. I just wanted to mention because I didn't do it in my demo. It's possible actually in those when you look at those metrics, you can also subscribe to an alert. So that might be important as well. There's a little wizard that you can follow there to create alerts. So people can say, hey, I'm interested in LOS and length of stay. If it trends above or below what normally is, then
And I
notify
did
me.
want to actually call out one more thing, which is that custom fields thing I mentioned. So
Mhm.
in here, we're looking at one of our data table asset entries. And right over here, we can link out to a custom SharePoint page, which has all of the field definitions right there with the definition, business logic of their calculation details, or how it's used specifically at Mount Sinai. This page, of course, is just, Control F searchable to find a specific tool. So that's in addition to the glossary pieces that you can see when you go into an individual metric. Oop, that one doesn't have one. Check my details here. In addition to this, you can also link out to other kinds of glossary pages and things. All of that's available within the tool. And the annotation piece, which I didn't cover, allows people to collaborate. And I think Marius mentioned that in the
Mhm.
demo as well. So
Yeah, so if
it'll be
there's a
very
data point, you
flexible
can
to
click
use.
on it and you can specify why
Yeah,
it was particularly high, why it was particularly low, and everyone
right.
else can see that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Damon. Let
Pleasure.
me if you guys have we're gonna go to the questions now. So if you have questions, please drop them in the questions and we'll get them. It looks like we've got a few. So we've got for you, Damon, I guess looks like how do you manage the access governance, the portal model? Typically it's managed each BI tool, but I can see a centralized method. I think you did touch on that, but maybe sort of cover a little bit
Yeah.
how you did it
I'll
for
go into a
across the
little more
different
detail. So
technologies. Yeah.
yeah, so the access control is managed in each system, right? So Epic has its own access control. Crystal has its own. Tableau has its own. WebFocus has its own. We bring all of that together in that data store within Metric Insight. So we don't have an external data store right now for all of our metadata. We are bringing all of that in. As I said, for some, it's through the connector. That's really only for Tableau. Everything else we're bringing in with custom SQL queries, bringing it all together, and respecting that provisioning from those individual sites. And that's why we have to refresh this daily. So if somebody asks for a report today, our stock answer to them is, okay, make the request and you can log in tomorrow. Now you'll see the ticket close, and we'll tell them when we close that ticket, your access will be ready tomorrow. And that's because we have to do that overnight refresh to get somebody access. Now, if we do have a VIP that needs access today, and we know that it's a VIP, that we can do a manual refresh of that data to make sure they can get access and the same day. But the way it is set up right now, rather than doing it like multiple times per day, most of the time our users are about 99.9% of the time they're fine with getting access the next day. So that's how we have it set up. And it's all automated.
There's another question from John about whether the portal model changes any of the licensing needs at the BI tool level. I'll answer generally, and then maybe you can give your thoughts. So generally speaking, you do need, if you're going to click into any content, you do need the license for that. So you still need BI tool licenses for any place where you want users to consume content interactively. I will say that some of our customers, not all, but some of our customers are able to reduce their BI tool licensing costs by virtue of the fact that when they do a detailed analysis of their user base, they find that they have some number of users that are either not using the licenses at all or underutilizing the licenses, right? And so those can be removed or shifted into more of that portal page experience where because sometimes your users don't need to actually see a dashboard to interact with. They just want the high level metric. And if that's the case, if that's the only reason they're using a dashboard or two, then you can reduce those licenses by using those portal page experiences where you deliver that. So there are some cases where that's the case. Do you want to add anything to that, Damon?
I have nothing to add. I think you covered it beautifully. Yeah, we do maintain all of our licenses for now exactly the same. And in most cases, because of our size, we buy unlimited user license packages anyway. So we're not necessarily worried about seat numbers. But if you're a smaller institution and you are worried about seat numbers, then maybe what Mario said would come into play. You might have some users that don't need those full-blown licenses. That just happens to not be our case, but I could see where that could be very helpful.
So the next question is, are you using Tableau on-premise, Tableau server, or Tableau cloud? This is from Javier.
So we are currently using Tableau hosted in our own cloud. So we have an Azure cloud that is part of our subnet. And so we're hosting Tableau there. We are in talks with Tableau about moving to Tableau cloud. This is probably more of a 2026 kind of thing. But we are definitely moving in that direction. And that's primarily because of all of the innovation. That's the term they throw around a lot, all the innovations in the cloud. So we are looking towards the cloud, but Mount Sinai, is traditionally a little bit more conservative about new technologies, and we're not racing to get into the cloud to take advantage of some of those new technologies quite yet. But we're definitely headed that way. And for now, it is in the cloud, but it's our own, on-prem cloud, if you will, within our subnet.
And those folks that are looking at transitioning between the cloud and on-premise for their tools, the other thing that this kind of a governance layer portal offers is a level of abstraction, right? So let's say you are on-premise, you create all the tiles, you create this experience. All you need to do, and I think there's a question of how something is added, and I'll maybe show that in a minute, and that will help explain this. But you basically, that tile persists, and you just change the link to where it goes to. So from a user experience perspective, they're completely isolated from that, and they're not impacted by that migration, which is not the case if everyone's got a bunch of bookmarks that they're keeping and they want to move around. Then all of a sudden, when you
Correct.
migrate, all their bookmarks are broken, and they've got to reset everything. And so that's
Correct.
a pain point. But before we go into how content is added, let's just go through some of these other questions. Damon, how did you determine the initial platforms to onboard and also the initial target audiences?
Yeah, so we decided to go big and include two very important clinical tools, and then two that were more commonly used on the business operations side. We couldn't imagine not including Epic. We couldn't imagine not including Tableau. WebFocus will be retired in about 18 months, but we still have a lot of legacy there. Crystal was another one where we have a lot of legacy clinical reporting. So for it to be really useful for people, we felt like that was the bare minimum. It's a lot of data. And so, it was a little bit more challenging perhaps than it needed to be to get started. We've talked with some other smaller healthcare groups who have said, no, we just put together like our top 100 and made them all elements, and we have the pretty catalog, and like we're done, and we'll figure it out little by little. Our leadership wanted to go the other way. We really wanted to try to reduce the impact especially on our Epic reporting teams, and help users find existing content in ways that they couldn't have before. Now, we're at the same time, we are sort of doctoring up and cleaning up our Epic catalog, and there probably will be some reflexive situations there sometimes, but still, because even the clinical reporting is moving to Tableau, we still wanted to have that in a centralized place so that people could find things. And even if they find that they're looking for these 5 metrics and 3 of them are on this one and 2 of them are on that one, we still saved a team member on the Epic reporting team 40, 50, 60 hours building a completely new report with those 5 or 6 metrics on it. And instead we were able to point that user to existing reports. So that was really the arching goal for us, which was we want to reduce duplicative effort and help our users find existing content. And we won't be doing that in an effective way if we use too small of a subset. The other thing is that we're starting with to your second part of your question, we're starting with all of our super user groups for our soft launch. And some of those are in the clinical side, some of those are on the business side, some of those are in population health research. And we have those relationships, and that still represents about 150 people. But the next phase of this, we'll be opening it up to all users. And that was another reason why, again, we wanted to have this larger content base to start. Again, it was a challenge. Maybe that's not the right approach for everybody, but that was what our leadership wanted, and we made it happen. We got a lot of great support from the MI team to make that happen.
So, David, I wonder maybe you can elaborate a little bit on it, because I think a lot of folks that are trying to put together these kinds of solutions are wondering, well, I know that this is something, it's got to be hospital network wide. I've got to get a lot of buy-in from my senior management on this. What kind of advice do you have for folks as they're going through that process in terms of how to really generate sort of a buy-in and support for this kind of a project?
if you do nothing more than take away the key points from Marius's presentation and the key points from my presentation, and find a way to put that into your local context. If you're having those same problems of metadata non-existent or spread all over the place and multiple systems, start small with a small group of friendly users, groups that you're already working with. Show them, explain them. From there, they're just going to be chomping at the bit and can't wait for you to get it out there. So that's my recommendation: is start working with your stakeholders early on, sell them on the high level concepts, deliver on those concepts, and then roll it out from there to a larger audience. And it really is kind of a no-brainer. It makes sense, and people want it. And a lot of health systems just don't have it, and it's because we depending on what kind of culture you're in, we either do a lot of building homegrown stuff and we just don't build all these features and functions in, or we have a patchwork of other platforms that don't talk to each other. We all end up in that situation. I mean, like I said, we only started with 4. We probably got 24 more that we need to fold in, but these were our 4 principles. So that's what I would say: is start with a manageable, not too small, not too big. Lean heavily on your friendlies. Make sure you get good feedback from those stakeholders, but sell them in advance on the concepts of what you're trying to achieve, and let them then be agents of change and promoters for you across the rest of the health system.
There's a follow-up question here from John about whether, when you refresh daily, are you seeing any performance hits on the source data sources of either users or analysts?
Well, we kick off our jobs early in the morning, and so far we've not had an issue with jobs not finishing on time. And we have a lot, like I said, they're big stores, especially for Epic and Bristol. So no, it's been okay. It's been okay, and we actually just did move our as I mentioned, all our whole health system into Epic billing. And there's been a lot of additional, as you can imagine, because of that, a lot of additional demand on our Clarity server within Epic. For those of you who are on Epic, you'll know what that is. And it's still been fine. So it's been, we're using, highly optimized SQL queries. The tool actually runs those queries for us, has access to the data sources, and it's been running very smoothly. We haven't had any issues. We are considering moving our Epic metadata into a SQL server off of the MySQL that comes with the product, because that is approaching a size where we could see performance impact, and we don't want to get there and have that problem. So we're preemptively taking the option that we have as part of the tool of using an external data store just for the Epic content. So you have that as an option as well if you do have a large enough store that you need to take it out.
Yeah, and the Mount Sinai team has kindly shared all of the SQL that's required to be able to get pull all this metadata out in a performant fashion with us. So if those of you on the call, if you do want to do that with Metric Insights, we're happy to show you how to we leverage those so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and all that. There was a question on Domo specifically. I don't know, Damon, if you have an opinion. I mean, from our perspective, we have customers that use Domo. I don't think so much in the healthcare space. It's a little less common because of all the data's in the cloud, right? But as far as it's all the same irrespective of tool, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a difference in terms of how you'd integrate it here, but I don't have any direct experience with Domo.
Okay. And then there's a question here about just seeing how you add a dashboard to your system. Do you want to show that in your environment? Do you want me to show it in the demo instance?
You better do that.
Okay, so let me do that. Yeah, we want to make sure
I'd have to have 3 or 4 things over to be able to do
we
that.
don't want to have anything that's sensitive that's being shown. So let me if you stop sharing, I'll share my screen and I'll just show you guys really quickly what that looks like.
We'll say it's very easy.
Yeah.
I see a question there about how many team members.
Yeah. If you can keep the questions, if you want to answer those questions while I get that going, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So we have a small team of 4 that are working on this, and none of them are full time right now. We did have some additional support from the Epic team and the Crystal Reports team to get those initial queries built out. But my team is quite small. I only manage 13 people, and this is a subset of my team that's been working on this, and it's not even been full time. So once it's the tool, there is definitely some overhead up front to get everything set up and going, as there would be with any tool. But then it's it's easy to manage. I mean, I hesitate to say that, but it is fairly easy. We made the choice when we talk about Tableau. There's a connector syncing capability that can sync everything in your Tableau server, make it even easier. But a lot of folks have the issue where there's a lot of stuff in Tableau that you don't want to be discoverable because it's like, people using it for their own ad hoc reporting and their daily jobs. And so we made the choice of manually creating our elements, and we've been very happy with that. And that's a one-time, hit of time. But then from there, it's just, your super users, you're the gatekeeper, you help them with that. Maybe down the road, you can give some people the ability to do it themselves. But yeah, it's not a huge overhead.
Yeah. So that to kind of double click into what Damon just said, there are a few ways to add. So there's the method that he said where you just add it manually, where if I click on the gear behind that tile, all you do is you hit create new, you pick which Tableau, let's say connection profile you're looking at, and then we expose the Tableau object model, right, through the API, and then you pick which report. So it takes a minute or two and you add it, and then you just, add whatever, all the metadata you want, information, description, things of that nature, link it to the KPIs if it's not being linked automatically, custom field values, things of that nature, right? So that will take about a minute or two per object if you're going to be doing that. There are also other mechanisms to do this. So there's a way that there's what Damon just mentioned, which is kind of a auto sync. So you can imagine a situation where perhaps in here there's a pending review bucket or a category where you sync in all of your Tableau content or all your Power BI content. Then in that scenario, the tiles are created automatically, but they're not visible to people. They're in a category that's invisible. And then you can have this workflow type mechanism. This is what we call publishing workflow. It's configurable, where you can set what these stages should be. And as part of that, users will review it and say, oh, okay, yes, this particular report, I want to move it. I can move it to the next stage. Maybe in the review stage, I come in and I add metadata that I need to complete the description, etc. Then when I'm done, I move it into published and certified, and then it has a certified status. So that's another way in which people do it. And there's a third way where there's also a bulk loader where you just select a whole bunch of different dashboards all at once and move them in. So you can do that as well. So it's really looking at the particular, what does your source system look like? To what extent is it organized in a way where you could auto sync? Do you want to just slowly bring in one thing at a time? In that case, that's still very doable. Or do you want to kind of do this sort of a bring in when there's new stuff, bring it into review, and then have some process by which it gets published out? So that's the idea. Were there any more questions, Damon, that you see in the Q&A?
Yeah, there's one that says, were there any unforeseen issues that arose during implementation? Yes, there were, as there always are. When we did the AD implementation, we wanted to, our Tableau was running through Okta at the time. We're actually moving off of that with an upgrade that we're doing soon. But that uses email address for authentication, and everything else uses network ID. But it was not the first time that the MI team had come across that, and we were able to easily resolve that. The connection to the AD itself was a little challenging, as again, as any of you who have ever done this before will know this already. But we had great support from MI to make that not a big issue. And then the next question was, how is security governed if it's connecting to other systems? So the tool is connected to the AD. And the way we've approached it is just-in-time provisioning. So the init script that actually creates the user, all of the metadata and the access control data is already in the system, whether the user's in there or not. But the first time they connect, the order of operations in the init script, adds them to all of the groups and things that they need to be in inside the tool off of the individual, security access data sets that are in the tool. And in that way, they're authenticated through the AD to get into the tool, and then the individual access controls come daily from those individual systems. So, as long as we're refreshing that data from Epic, from Crystal, from Tableau, it's fresh and it's current, and the AD takes care of making sure that the user is authenticated and real. So I hope that answered your question.
And we should clarify that the reason that you did it that way is, in your case, really you don't use AD groups within these tools to
Correct.
control security, right? Because some of our customers, manage everything through AD groups, in which case, if you do that, then there's a separate sync process that you can do where you just point to the AD groups, assign them to the right categories, and then the syncing happens through your AD system. But in those cases, like for example, Epic, obviously, right, that does not, that isn't driven by AD, and you can, and in Damon's case, in the case of Mount Sinai, many, I think all the other sources are not either. So in those cases, you can do this automated synchronization where we reach into the metadata of the actual tool and then get the security information and then synchronize on a daily or more frequent basis, whatever is required.
Because using AD groups makes way too much sense. Why would we do that?
The glorious future, they'll be coming.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll get there. But yes, you're right. We have decentralized security in each system. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. There's so many questions. I don't know if we got to all of them. I'm looking to see.
Somebody made a comment up at the top about metadata being more restricted in Tableau Cloud. We haven't gotten there yet, so I don't have any comments on that. But thank you for that comment. We'll look into that.
Yeah. I mean, we get it through a workbook that we deploy on top of the Tableau data model, and it's so assuming that you can get that through your cloud infrastructure, then that would work. If it's not permitted, then that's the security sync would not be possible in that case. You'd have to do it through AD groups or something like that. And then there were some questions about just generally planning and implementation. Can you speak to that a little bit about what that experience was like for you? What?
Yeah. So, again, we actually started the negotiation of the contract process, and while we were doing that, the team and I were looking at all of the different approaches we're going to have to take on the metadata. So we did do a fair amount of planning and outreach and got some of that work started even before we got the contract signed. So by the time we hit the ground running, we were ready to go. And Marius and the team gave us a very comprehensive sort of Gantt chart of all the steps and the pieces of the puzzle. We had, of course, the initial group was working with our DevOps team to get the servers up and running and to get all the pieces installed and all the connections working, et cetera. That took a few weeks, and it took longer than it would need to because of some internal delays. So, the timeline you get from MI is the timeline if you've got a dedicated team and no blockers, so you have to sort of add your own filter on top of that for what your internal culture to be and how long things requests take with all the different teams that you have to work with to get it up and running.
Yeah.
It's a straightforward process, and when you get that list of items, it all makes sense, and you just have to sort of chip away at it like you would with any other project.
And it typically, if you guys want just a general for those in the audience, if you want a general range, we see usually the fastest it ever gets done is something like around a 60-day timeline. Maybe typical is around 3 months to maybe as much as 6 months if there are, organizational blockers in the sense of you have to work through these issues of what to bring over, how do you want to organize it, things like that. If that takes some time internally. But if everything is lined up, right at the get-go as for what needs to be done, then you're looking at probably a 2 to 3 month effort to stand everything up and roll out an initial version. Also depends, as Damon pointed out, as to whether you take the entire bite of the apple as they did right off the get-go and bring in everything, or do you sort of start with a more incremental approach, which then obviously it's faster to get to, so you can get even faster if you do that. There's a question here about, do the data glossary include fields from all the data sources? Do you have any reports you pull from other systems? I'm not exactly sure what that's meaning. I think the question there is about, in your case, the data glossary can come from anywhere. As far as what happens is you bring the glossary into what's called a metric insights data set. It can be sourced from CSV, or in the case if you have like this information like APIs, data governance tools like Calibra or Relation, then we would pull that information through APIs for that tools. So if you have glossary information in a system that has an API, we can bring in that way. If not, then you just do an extract into some kind of a CSV format, or if you have something in a SharePoint list, we can connect to that and bring it in. And oftentimes, there's also multiple sources. Like I believe, Damon, in your case, like Epic some of the Epic metadata comes from Epic itself, right?
That's
and other things come from other sources.
Yeah, we don't have any glossary terms coming from Epic, but we do have, all metadata coming from each of those BI platforms. All the glossary is coming from one source, and that is definitely a work in progress. We're not done, but we are pulling everything from one source. There'd be no reason why you couldn't pull it from multiple sources and smash it together if that makes sense for your organization. Totally doable and doable within the MI platform.
Great. Wow, we got a lot of questions, which is great. I guess this is probably a good place to try to wrap things up. So thank
just
you everyone
realized-
for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Damon.
I just realized that that question about planning was actually how long. I didn't answer the how long part. So we did take about 2 months to plan it out before we hit the ground running, and we were definitely more in that 3 to 6 month range. Totally on us for that one, but yes, it absolutely could be done faster if you were organized and started small. So exactly as Marius said.
Great. If anyone thinks of other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We can get questions to Damon as well. And we'll try to get your answers. Really appreciate everyone joining us. Damon, thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing your experience there with everyone here.
Our pleasure. Our
all right.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.